insists on the internal relation between the body's sensibility and its aesthetic environment. Today, the relatively new fields of everyday aesthetics shares a similar theoretical concern with the aesthetic environment, but it does not have ontological or speculative aspirations. As Yuriko Saito explains, everyday aesthetics is a new field in the West, much older in Japan, that is dedicated to investigating the experience gained by the senses and sensibility, especially in their everyday, mundane mode, including domestic rather than artistic concepts like messy, tidy, dirty, clean, cluttered, and so on. It betrays an implicit phenomenological orientation when Saito writes that it is not about rendering the ordinary extraordinary, as much as it is about providing a close inspection of the familiar as familiar, especially our everyday habits, routines, and chores. One is reminded of Heidegger's analyses of the ready-to-hand and the worldhood of the world, as well as Merleau-Ponty's analysis of the spatiality of the lived body. It seems to me that the concern in everyday aesthetics with making the ordinary an object of aesthetic reflection must be grounded in an ontology of ordinary aesthetic experience, like that found in Levinas's speculative aesthetics or something comparable. If everyday aesthetics concerns itself with the habitual, the routine, and the familiar, what consciousness sees without seeing, as Levinas says, then it should not only turn to phenomenology's analyses of these phenomena and their constitution, but to the resources of speculative aesthetics, which can help everyday aesthetics understand the ontology of the subject who is constituted by everyday environments. Likewise, everyday aesthetics can provide speculative philosophy with a wealth of content for its analyses and evaluations. If it's true that the aesthetics of everyday life have a hand in shaping who we are and what we can do in the world we inhabit, then consequently design takes on an ethical significance that cannot be ignored. The aesthetic and ethical become intertwined and thus prone to what Saito calls moral aesthetic judgments. We should then ask of any design spaces or artifacts, particularly those produced for public consumption, if the care with which they are made results in care for the user's well-being. An ethics and aesthetics of responsible design emerges here, at the forefront of which is consideration of the sensuous qualities of objects, environments, atmospheres, and whether or not these objects, environments, atmospheres are harmful to their users or inhabitants. This is not to say that it's necessarily wrong or unethical for designers to produce challenging or demanding objects, but that there are ethical grounds for limiting the design of everyday objects, environments, and atmospheres, and that this limitation must be located in the sensuous qualities of the objects, environments, and atmospheres themselves, not in the intentions of the designer. I emphasize this last point to draw attention to the fact that the sensory constitution of everyday objects, the way these objects strike our senses and register in our bodies, is worthy of serious aesthetic consideration, and that this consideration is inextricably bound up with ethical implications. Consequently, as Saito contends, a case can be made for an art education of everyday aesthetic experiences because ordinary, everyday aesthetic experiences are more significant than experiences of high art informing one's identity and view of the world beyond personal experience. The idea that everyday aesthetic experience can form and inform one's identity is one that is best explored, I think, at the intersection of speculative philosophy, aesthetics, art, architectural theory, curation, design, and phenomenology. Okay, thank you very much.